Your first deal was one of the better deals that I've seen. You probably made $45,000 after funding on that or so.
Yeah, that first deal was, it went really well. Really easy to actually see that proof of concept and keep on going down the road with this.
The community, the other things, the weekly calls, like, have you gotten a lot out of that, or like, what are your thoughts on the community?
The community has been definitely the most helpful thing to me. There's a lot of guys in there that have helped me out, and I've tried to return the favor by helping all the newer guys out. Whenever they have questions, I'll try and help them whenever possible. And it's just been amazing to have that community.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Ron Apke, joined today by one of our students, Adam Reilly. He's been in the program for about 8-9 months. Really excited to have you today, Adam.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah, so let's just get into, Adam. That's what I like asking everyone. How did you get into land flipping?
So it was actually kind of a long path that led me to it. My day job for the past 10 years has been in civil engineering, mostly working in subdivisions.
Mm.
And I always sat there and watched all these guys come to us to design their subdivisions, their roads, their utilities, and I'm like, okay, how do they get into this? I'd love to do that, but I always thought it was, you need money to do it. So I always just kept putting it off and putting it off. And then at one point, mid last year, mid 2023, of all people, my grandmother kind of triggered it. So I went to visit her for a week, hung out, learned about her real estate investing in the past. She used to be a commercial real estate owner. So she had several industrial buildings up in Salt Lake City. And that just kind of triggered me, like put that little thing in the back of my mind. I was like, okay, if she can do this, someone who didn't ever finish high school, then I could do this. So I was like, okay, I spent 6 months just reading, learning, listening to podcasts, found you guys, found Bigger Pockets. I was just absorbing everything and anything I could come across. And then around November, Thanksgiving that year, I kind of made the plunge. I took a course from someone kind of local here in Texas, started his stuff, and then I came across you guys and found your course, which was much more built out and influential. So I took the plunge into that and just kind of dove headfirst into just following everything you guys laid out. And so far it's worked for me.
Awesome. So yeah, you learned from your grandma. We hear it that people learn from it different ways. I think Nick last week was Nick. Yeah, he learned from his hairstylist that told him about it. So it's cool seeing all the different places. And your grandma, that's a new one for sure. So you being an engineer, like you're probably pretty analytical with stuff. So is that kind of, it took you some time to get into it, or like, was it like trying to find out proof of concept, or what was that like, that learning process? Like, okay, this kind of makes a little sense. I think I can make something work here.
So for me, it was really the analytical stuff. I did a lot of analyzing jobs and deals. It was like looking at properties, looking at the pricing, looking how I can get the money to work. A lot of it was really struggling with how does the money work. So I spent a lot of time just trying to figure that part out without having to borrow money from someone. Uh, was, I guess I went through like a dozen different spreadsheets on each project, just trying to figure out, okay, how's this going to math out? And
Nice.
I did really get stuck in the analysis paralysis because it was just looking at everything and I'm like, okay, how am I going to get this to work? Because I didn't know the next steps. So even when I was going through your class, it was like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do the next step? What does that look like? I was so slow and detrimental to myself by not taking those steps, just being so antsy, and
Mm-hmm.
baby stepping them really kept me from going faster, farther.
How was that at the beginning as far as balancing out this education, learning this with your full-time job?
Well, at the time, I had actually just switched jobs, so the job I have now has actually been really laid back, meeting just my minimum hours. So I would be working in the office twice a week, at home 3 days a week, and I would just be more flexible to where I could just be doing this, making calls, doing research, answering calls. Uh, so probably spent a lot of my day just fielding calls, dealing with terrible leads because I didn't
Mhm.
know what I was doing. So I was just trying to make every lead a deal.
That makes
And
sense. You're not the only person to do that. It's definitely a normal kind of starting point. It's good, like to fight for deals and try to make deals happen. And some areas just have some bad land, so that might have been part of the issue for sure.
Mhm.
Um, so how long did it take you? You purchased the course. I just took a look. It looks like you purchased the course in February. How long before you like started marketing?
So before I even took your course, I actually had started sending out some mailers. That other course I'd taken had a few templates that I started using. I ended up scrapping those from your course and using yours. But by the time I had gotten to your course, I'd sent out like 2,000 mailers, mostly to local because I'm in Texas and uh, I wanted to start local because of what I knew because I was originally wanting to get into subdivisions because that was my background.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sent out those mailers, which were terribly priced because Texas being a non-disclosure state, I was just going off of what I could see. I had a couple of realtors that could help me in the area, but their data wasn't helpful enough. And so I ended up just scrapping all of that and moving on to a more disclosure state. So I went to Oklahoma, which was the next one, where I could see all that data. It was nearby, I could get the data, and it was probably within a month and a half that I got that first deal.
Yeah, so that first deal came along. How much marketing did it take? So you sent 2,000 prior to our course. How much marketing did you send? You don't have to be exact with it as far as about how much marketing were you sending? Was it just mail as well?
Yeah, it was just mail at the time, and it's pretty much still mail now. But I was sending about 1,000 to 1,500 every 2 weeks.
Okay. So you weren't too far in as far as like you weren't too much money out before you got that first deal. I know you sent 2,000 to
Hmm.
Texas, priced poorly, so that's 1,200 bucks, and then another couple thousand. So yeah, you weren't in a bad spot when you got that first deal, and you got that first deal like you said about a month after. It looked like a month after you
Yep.
started. And what was that like? So you obviously were getting some leads. I believe you brought us more than one deal. I don't know if any other ended up working out, but your first deal was one of the better deals that I've seen since I've been doing this.
Yeah, that first deal was pretty good. They were looking to just get rid of it. It was kind of out of the blue. I wasn't sure they were even going to go with it. It took
Hmm.
a couple of conversations to get them to the price I wanted them at, but it wasn't as difficult as some of the other conversations I've had with other sellers.
Yeah.
So it went really well. It went so smoothly. And like I said before, it really just set that expectation a little bit too high for me. Made it really easy to actually see that proof of concept and keep on going down the road with this.
Yeah, and you made I think we bought it for 70, sold for $130,000, and you probably made
Yep.
$45,000 after funding on that or so. So that's what I tell people. Also, like some people get so down about starting slow. It can be a curse in itself to start with a really high note. And I think that kind of like it raises your expectations. And then like when you have mailers come back that might not be as successful, I'm sure that's a lot more difficult than the reverse where you have few mailers that struggle at first and then you get a really good deal.
Right.
Is that
Yeah,
something
it
that
was.
is that something that the next couple months after that it was kind of difficult?
Yeah, because of the market I chose to go through, Oklahoma, and at the time, the land portal didn't have the filtering out
Yeah.
landlocked, so I ended up dealing with a lot of that. And that was really a struggle. So I ended up having to pivot a little bit and finding a slightly better market because the Oklahoma has a whole landlocked issue, plus all the gas and oil drilling, which made it much more difficult to actually make most of that land work.
Hmm. So you said you talked a little bit about earlier that you had to negotiate down on that first deal. Is that correct?
Yeah, I wanted it down below 60, and he wanted 65 at the time, so I was able to get it down, I think, about 10,000.
So you got it down to what'd you get it down to? What was the buy price?
Uh,
All in price looked like 70. Is that correct? Maybe
yeah,
that's all.
all in was 70, so it was
Okay.
yeah, it was a little above what I really
Yeah.
wanted to get it for, but it's still a pretty good price for
It
us.
worked out. You bought it and you went under contract so fast. Like our sale date was less than a month after our purchase date, which means like you went under contract pretty much immediately, I think, with a cash buyer. And like that speed that you sold that, it definitely helps turn money fast. Was there anything you did that special, or do you think you're just priced really fairly to sell it
I
really
think
fast?
we were I think we were priced aggressively. I was surprised so much by it. Like we put Dalton on it as the realtor. Like
I remember.
you
Okay.
guys signed the paperwork for him to take it on Friday night. I woke up the next morning to a message saying, "Hey, I already have a buyer."
Nothing's wrong with that. That's a good start, and that was $45,000 that you made on that deal. So, like you said, you've had some and that's why I really want to have a conversation because you had such a high note at the start, and there's always going to be struggles in this business. Let's talk about the last few months, the last 6 months or so. You said you've had some struggles as far as that, but even then, like everything that's happened after that, that is struggle. Like you still made $45,000 on a single deal, which is proof of concept, which I'm sure will make you profitable on the year. But let's just talk about like, is it a volume thing the last 6 months that you think you could have been better with consistent marketing, or what's kind of your analysis?
So I think I had a good volume going out. My problem was most likely that I wasn't doing a good enough job in some of the markets to price it right. I've had a few where I was overpriced, a few where I was way underpriced. Just hit or miss on some of the more rural counties where the
Mm,
data wasn't available for the size range I was targeting. So I was kind of plugging in some numbers to try and fit what I thought was going to work. Some of them was relying a little too heavily on the spreadsheet to do the work for me and not looking through the data more in depth in some cases.
mm-hmm.
So I think I kind of just put myself in a rut by doing that, and then a couple of counties just hit nothing. Nothing came
Yeah.
back. Nobody even called. No mail.
What's your marketing volume right now?
I am, well, I was doing about 1,500 every 2 weeks. So I've actually slowed down over the holidays because I'm trying to refocus and reanalyze how I got to where I am so that I can hit 2025 with a better run.
Got it. So you're sending about 3,000 a month,
Yep.
or you were, and then you've ramped that back a little bit just because of holidays. Um,
Yeah.
so have there been any other deals start to finish that you've done thus far?
Not to finish, I have a 2 acre that I've partnered on in Jasper, Indiana. That one
Hmm.
has actually been sitting for a couple months. We're struggling to get that sold. I think right now the holidays are probably affecting that, but
In the winter, yeah.
we're talking about a price reduction on that one.
What'd you buy
And then I
that for?
have a an acre that I've actually just got under contract to sell. So we should be closing on that at the end of this month.
Nice. So yeah, you get some momentum, and it reminds me of Shelby. She's been on the podcast a few times. She got started, and I think her first deal was like buy for 12, sell for 35 or something. Um, it's a smaller deal than what you had, but similar profit, $30,000 versus 45. And then she had like a 6 month lull, and then she made 300 grand on a subdivide after that. So it's gonna come at some point, like a struggle, and like fighting through it. I give you a lot of credit. You've been consistent, which is the most important part to be successful in this business, without a doubt, is the consistency. And you've stayed consistent through kind of the ups and downs. That 2 acre one that you have on the market, what did you buy it for, and what did you list it for?
We bought that one for about 19 grand,
Yeah.
all in. We had it originally listed at 68. Right now it's been brought down to 48 just because we couldn't get it moving.
And you funded that yourself?
No, I partnered with someone in the community,
Nice. So
William.
I mean, you have a really good deal in the pipeline still. So yeah, I mean, your 2024, when you look back at it, like yeah, there's going to be ups and downs, but are you going to view this year as like a success in the land flipping business, or is it kind of let's not look after that deal? Because if you're just like, okay, after that deal, I was going to project $300,000 profit, that might be, but going into year and like everything that's happened, ups and downs, like would you view 2024 as a success in land flipping?
I completely would. Now, I
Yeah.
originally set up my business with a target for the year. Now, I've not hit that, but I'm not going to say that's a failure because I've actually been able to make progression toward that.
Yeah.
and any
So
progression is improvement.
100%. So yeah, that's good to look back and kind of analyze. Going into 2025, what are you trying to do? I mean, you can talk about numbers, you can talk about just like changes you're making in your business. What are your thoughts going into 2025?
So I want to really go after a few more bigger deals. I want to hit a couple of numbers. So I live off of the traction model for business.
For
So I
sure.
helped use that for a couple of firms in the past. I want to hit at least 150K profit for the year. So that looks like I'm going to have to do a couple of 100,000 deals if I can get that, plus a few of the smaller ones that just will fill in there. I
Hmm.
really want to get to a point where I'm getting at least 1 to 2 deals a month all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, if you can hit, I think it's very realistic as far as, and I think when you start like getting momentum in 2025, you're going to look back and be like, all the stuff you learned in 2024, struggles, everything like that. Is there part of the business a skill that you're working on? I know you're sometimes engineers struggle with the sales aspect of things. Is that a skill that you're trying to work on? You seem like, I mean, you had no problem negotiating someone down. You seem like probably just like a blunt salesperson. Is that kind of, is that a skill that you've worked on?
It is definitely the hardest skill for me. I've always been just so introverted. Like
Yeah.
up until the last 4 or 5 years, I was not a people person. My last firm I actually was working at, I was the business development person in part of the region we work in. So I was out there schmoozing, getting to know people, learning the soft skills. So this has actually been an easier transition than it maybe would have been before.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still very difficult to do the sales, get out there and negotiate down that price. I
Yeah.
still get real anxiety about having to pick up the phone and call someone to say, hey, that price isn't going to work.
Mm-hmm. But you make the calls happen still, right?
I do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. I wouldn't say I'm there's times when like there when there's conversation like oh this conversation is gonna suck, but just getting through it, it feels good once you get on the other side, no matter what the result. Like obviously you want to make the deal happen, but just fighting through making that conversation happen is obviously really really important. What do you see of kind of the business model in 2025, as just as an industry, land flipping as a whole? Do you think tides are changing in any way? Like what are your thoughts on that?
I think that we're going to see more texting. I think the model for just direct mail is still solid, and we're going to see steady growth on that. But I think the implementation of like launch control and other services that get those leads generated through text is going to help offset everything a little bit to the upside. And I think that working through the legals of all of that is going to be a boon to everyone that can actually work through it.
Are you looking into implementing texting, or have you?
I did try to start implementing it. I have started back in September, October. I signed up with Launch Control. I started doing follow-up texting. One of the deals I'm doing due diligence on is actually through the texting.
Hmm.
It was a mailer that I sent right next door to the one that I just closed on in like Newcastle, Indiana. So I have to look at that one, see if it'll still work. And
Nice.
then I started toying around with just cold texting. I did about 600 of those so far. Most of those just haven't returned anything yet, but I think once I get my feet wet on texting in that manner, I think it'll go even better.
Yeah, I think texting is going to be huge going 2025 beyond. Just
Mhm.
multiple marketing methods, like you guys have
Yeah.
probably heard me talk about quite a bit. As far as just like different types of marketing, just one and done marketing. I'm not saying direct mail won't work, but it gets really expensive. And as we talk to more and more people, like trying to make your marketing more efficient, and work your leads more, you already have the lead as far as you send a direct piece of direct mail, send a follow up text. I think it's huge going into that. Um, what has the advantage, or like the community, the other things, the weekly calls, like have you gotten a lot out of that, or like what are your thoughts on the community? Like what has that brought you? Has it helped you through like harder times that you've had in the business? Curious your thoughts on that.
So the community has been definitely the most helpful thing to me. Coming into this, I knew basically the coursework and I knew the steps. But having that community there to say, hey, you can do this, or here's how I would handle this, has been so helpful when I come with a question. I usually kind of have a gut feeling on the answer. I kind of analyze it or overanalyze it, and I know what the answer would be, but I'm
Yeah.
stuck on it. So I'll say, hey guys, help me out with this. What would you do? And a lot of it's just to validate me and my thinking so that I'm
Mm,
getting out of that paralysis that I'm constantly getting stuck in. And I think being the analytical type, I really needed that. I really appreciate the community for that. There's a
yeah.
lot of guys in there that have helped me out, and I've tried to return the favor by helping all the newer guys out. Whenever they have questions, I'll try and help them whenever possible.
Hmm.
And it's just been amazing to have that community.
Have you found it? Have you improved at like saying no to deals as far as like just this is part of the hurdle for a lot of people is like analyzing deals takes so long at first because you have no clue what you're really looking at. As you grow with that, like it's easier and not wasting time on deals that just bad land or whatever. Has that improved? I assume over the last 10 months.
Oh yeah, I've definitely gotten better at that. There was like before I said I tried to make every deal possible. This time I'm just analyzing them, making sure they look good, and then if they don't, I just throw them out. I
Yeah.
may come back and try and get a better price if it's on the edge of what would be a good piece of property, but a lot of the time I'm able to see if it's a good deal or not a lot sooner.
Have you gone back to any of those counties that you said had a lot of landlocked properties with the land portal now where you can get rid of landlocked properties? Have you gone back to some of those areas? Because that obviously sometimes it eliminates 30-40% of properties because counties have so many landlocked. I know exactly where you're talking about. And some of the areas are like, okay, why are all these parcels have no road access? Have you gone back to any of those areas?
No, I've been working in Indiana a lot, so
Yeah.
I just don't want to jump states. So I'm just sticking with one area that has worked for me so
Hmm.
far.
You talk about bigger deals. Have you used the land portal to target anything different than what we just teach in the course as far as that where you might be targeting road frontage or something like that?
No, I've just been sticking with the coursework to make sure I can get the reps on the
Yeah.
basics. I have done a couple larger sets where I've pulled 40 to 100 acres to try and see if I can get something for a subdivide, but I haven't gotten very far with those experiments because I'm trying to keep the steady stream going while I actually play with those.
That makes sense. So are you you're getting 1 acre deal, so I assume you're starting like 1 acres and going to what acre range are you kind of targeting right now?
It's been variable. So some of the counties where there's not a lot of data for certain sizes, I'll stick within the smaller ranges, 1
Hmm.
to 20. But I've had some counties where I've gone up to 100 acres and I've tried to hit those, especially when there's not a lot of land available to get me to my 1500 data point range that I'm always looking for each mailer.
So you're doing 2 counties essentially per month, 1,500 about
Yep.
per mailer, and that's just kind of what your business. I like that a lot, and you just adjust the acreage range to get those counts essentially.
That's right.
You don't make adjust like if there's a bigger one, do you just lower the acreage target, or what does that look like if you get 2 to 20 acres and you get 3,000 data points? Do you what does that look like? What's your strategy there?
Oh, I'll just keep those and I'll just split them in half so that I'm
Okay.
doing about 1500. That way I can just spread out those leads. And the whole
Okay.
goal is not to have 3000 leads that are coming in
Yeah.
potentially at one time.
So based on how you're doing some things and how consistent you are with marketing, I'm sure you never really get bogged down with too many incoming leads. Once you do texting at a higher volume, for sure, you're going to get a lot of incoming leads. But just being as consistent as it sounds like you've been, like you're never getting blown up with 20 leads in a day. I don't think, right? So you're spreading your business out. I think that gives so much ability for it to grow when you're as consistent as you are. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, the most maybe I've gotten in one day is 10 or 12 calls, and that's
Yeah.
usually the day that the mail hits,
Hmm.
and that's usually the hate mail. So I'm usually fine with that. It normally hits on a Friday, and so I'll get those calls on a Friday or a Saturday. And I've learned not to let it tank my weekend, but
Hmm.
then the following week I usually start getting some actual good leads that I can start working through.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people looking into a business model like this who might be engineers who might have that really analytical mindset like you. Any advice for them, kind of people who there's a lot of people in our program right now too who probably are in a similar spot to where you were 8 months ago, with a very analytical, data-driven background, what kind of advice would you give to them?
Turn your brain off. That's the biggest advice. Turn your brain off. If you can, uh, or you get stuck at something, definitely ask someone for their second opinion. That outside source, outside validation is going to do wonders to just get you over that hurdle because it just, once you get stuck and you don't ask for help, you're just going to stay there and you need to keep moving forward.
That's huge. I think that's what the community is there for. That's what Daniel and I are
Mm-hmm.
there for, as far as people who join the member calls. There's so many people out there who are successful who don't have too loud of a voice in our community, but like the people in our member calls asking questions in those, like continue to ask questions, because we're there for the people who have been with us for 3 years. We're there for the people who have been with us for 3 days, and just helping everyone is definitely a huge part of it. But Adam, I really appreciate your story. Appreciate hearing from you. If you guys are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button below. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, share this with a friend. Appreciate it so much. We'll talk to you next time.
As always, thank you for joining. Please do us a huge favor and like and subscribe our YouTube channel and share this with a friend. It really means the world to Ron and I, but more importantly, it could help change the life of someone else. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next episode.